The courtroom was so silent you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning vents and the scratching of the court reporter's pen. I sat at the heavy oak table with my hands folded tightly in my lap. I was staring straight ahead at the dark wood of the bench where the judge sat. The air inside the room felt incredibly heavy. It was charged with the kind of thick electricity that only comes right before a massive storm breaks. My heart was beating a steady rhythm against my ribs. I was not afraid anymore. I was just waiting. Judge Mercer was a stern man who looked like he had zero tolerance for nonsense in his courtroom. He adjusted his reading glasses and looked down at the thick stack of financial documents my attorney had just handed him. He read in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then he looked over the rim of his glasses at my husband. "Mr. Declan," the judge said. His deep voice echoed off the wood-paneled walls. "Your legal filings repeatedly state that your wife is financially unstable. You claim she was entirely dependent on marital assets. You went so far as to accuse her of hiding a small savings account, and you demanded temporary control of all household funds to prevent her from draining them." Declan sat up straighter in his chair. He adjusted the cuffs of his expensive tailored suit. He looked confident. He looked like a man who believed he had already won the game. "Yes, Your Honor," Declan said smoothly. "We just want a fair and equitable division of whatever assets are left." Judge Mercer slowly turned another page. He did not look amused. "That is fascinating," the judge said flatly. "Because according to these verified financial records, your wife is not financially unstable. She is the sole beneficiary of a trust fund. The verified net worth of this trust is $45,200,000. A collective gasp sucked the air right out of the room. The sound did not come from me. It came from the row of seats directly behind my husband. I heard a sharp, choking sound. It was followed by the heavy thud of a designer purse hitting the floor. Blythe, my mother-in-law, had grabbed the back of the wooden pew. Her face had been flushed with arrogance all morning. Now it turned the color of old ash. She swayed back and forth, her eyes wide with unadulterated shock. Before anyone could reach her, her knees gave out. She collapsed back into her seat, gasping for air as if she were drowning. Declan froze. The smug, confident smile he had worn all morning simply vanished from his face. The color drained from his cheeks. He turned his head slowly, looking at me as if I were a ghost. He was staring at a woman he thought he could crush. He was looking at a woman he had sneered at just weeks earlier when he thought I was not listening. I still remember the exact cruel words he said to his mistress in that hotel lobby in Chicago. "She is just a lowly auditor. She does not have a dime to fight me. Once the trust is cleared, I will file, break her down, and take it all." Those words had ripped my heart out of my chest. They had destroyed the foundation of my entire adult life. For 16 long years, I had loved this man with every fiber of my being. I had built a life with him. I had raised 2 beautiful children with him. I had swallowed my pride more times than I could ever count just to keep the peace in his incredibly toxic family. I had endured the endless family drama, the subtle mockery, the constant humiliation of never being quite good enough for his mother or his golden child sister. And for what? To be discarded the second he thought he could cash in on my grief? To understand how we ended up in this cold courtroom, you have to understand the man I married. Declan was a regional sales director. He drove a luxury car we could barely afford. He wore designer suits that cost more than our monthly mortgage. He cared far more about his public image than he did about our actual financial reality. I, on the other hand, was a corporate compliance auditor. My job was not glamorous. I wore practical flat shoes. I carried a sensible tote bag. I spent my days looking at endless spreadsheets, finding discrepancies, and ensuring corporate rules were followed strictly. My salary was solid and reliable, but in Declan's eyes, it was a joke. I was the invisible workhorse of the family. He was the shining star. He needed everyone to see him as wealthy and successful. He thrived on the illusion of power and dominance. My grandfather, Harrison, was the exact opposite of my husband. He was the kind of man who drove a rusted 20-year-old sedan. He wore the same frayed brown wool coat every single winter. He refused to pay extra for guacamole at restaurants because he said it was a scam. He lived in a very modest house, grew his own tomatoes in the backyard, and always slipped my kids a crisp $20 bill when we visited. I loved him dearly. I thought he lived on a fixed pension. I had no idea that behind that frugal exterior was one of the sharpest real estate and investment minds in the entire state. Grandpa Harrison never flaunted his wealth because he knew exactly what money did to people. He knew it made them greedy. He knew it made them cruel. He knew it destroyed families. I used to think Declan only loved money because he grew up always wanting more of it. I used to excuse his obsession with status as a harmless character flaw. I spent years making endless excuses for the terrible way he and his family treated me. I told myself he was just stressed at work. But as I sat in that courtroom, watching my husband's fake world crumble to pieces, I realized a terrifying truth. Declan did not just love money. He loved power. And more than anything else in the world, he loved the feeling of looking down on me. He loved seeing me without money because it made him feel like a king reigning over a peasant. But the king was about to lose his crown. And I was the one holding the hammer that would smash it. If my 16-year marriage was a museum, the exhibits would be dedicated entirely to the dark art of subtle humiliation. When you are systematically broken down over a decade and a half, you do not always notice the tiny cracks forming in the foundation of your self-worth. You just get used to living in a house that is slowly falling apart around you. Exhibit A was always our annual Thanksgiving dinner. Every single year, we hosted the holiday at our house. I loved cooking, but my mother-in-law, Blythe, treated the occasion like it was her personal catering event. I would spend 3 exhausting days prepping, chopping, and roasting. I made everything from scratch. But the very moment Blythe walked through my front door, the kitchen was no longer mine. She would take over. 2 years ago, I made a special sweet potato casserole. It was a cherished recipe passed down directly from my grandmother. I placed it proudly in the center of the dining table. It smelled of cinnamon and toasted marshmallows. Blythe walked over, holding a store-bought pie that her daughter Sloane had brought. Sloane was 32 years old, chronically unemployed, and lived in a luxury apartment funded entirely by Blythe and, secretly, by Declan. Blythe physically pushed my warm casserole to the side, nearly knocking it off the edge of the table, to make room for Sloane's cold pie. "Oh, Marin," Blythe said. Her voice was dripping with fake pity and condescension. "We know how hard you work at your little auditing job. You really should not tire yourself out trying to cook for a crowd. Sloane has such a refined palate, she knows exactly where to buy the best things. Leave the heavy lifting to people with actual taste." Declan sat at the head of the table pouring wine. Did he defend me? Did he tell his mother to respect my home and my effort? No. He laughed. He actually laughed. "Come on, Marin, it is just a pie. Do not be so sensitive. You know my sister has an eye for quality. Let it go." I swallowed the heavy lump in my throat and ate my dinner in silence. I tasted nothing. I was the invisible child in my own home. Exhibit B was the year my son, Flynn, needed braces. Flynn was 14 years old. He was a quiet, observant boy who noticed far more than he ever said out loud. His adult teeth were coming in crooked, and it was starting to severely affect his confidence. He stopped smiling in photos. He covered his mouth when he laughed. I brought the orthodontist's estimate to Declan. It was a few $1,000s. Declan looked at the paper and sighed heavily. He rubbed his temples as if I had just asked him to fund a mission to outer space. "Marin, things are really tight right now," he said dismissively. "My department missed its quarterly target. We just cannot swing this expense. Tell Flynn he has to wait another year. It is not an emergency." I felt terrible, but I trusted my husband. I thought we were truly struggling. I went to Flynn and gently told him we had to wait. My sweet boy just nodded, looked at the floor, and stopped smiling with his teeth showing entirely. Exactly 1 week later, Declan came home from a business trip with a brand new Rolex watch on his wrist. The heavy stainless steel gleamed under the kitchen lights. I stared at it, utterly speechless. The cost of that watch could have paid for my son's braces 3 times over. I need it for networking, Marin, he said defensively before I even opened my mouth to protest. You do not understand high-level corporate sales. You have to look successful to be successful. Clients judge you by what you wear. It is an investment in our future. You have to see the bigger picture. I did not argue. I was too tired to fight. I just picked up extra overtime shifts at the auditing firm. I worked every weekend for 3 months, poring over compliance reports until my eyes burned and my back ached, and I paid for my son's braces myself. Declan never even asked how I managed to afford it. He just enjoyed his watch. Exhibit C was the incident with my car. I drove a reliable but aging sedan. It was nothing fancy, but it was paid off and got me to work safely. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Sloane called my phone, crying hysterically that her car was in the shop and she desperately needed to run an urgent errand. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let her borrow my vehicle. She returned it 3 long hours later with a massive, deep scrape down the entire passenger side. She had sideswiped a concrete pillar in a parking garage because she was texting while driving. Sloane did not apologize. She did not offer to pay for the damage. Instead, she tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter and sighed loudly. Honestly, Marin, your car is so clunky and hard to drive. The steering is terrible. You really should upgrade. It is an actual hazard to be on the road with that thing. I was furious. I demanded she pay for the repair. Sloane immediately burst into theatrical tears and called Declan. Within minutes, my husband stormed into the kitchen, his face red with anger. Are you seriously harassing my sister over a tiny scratch on that piece of junk? Declan yelled, pointing his finger at me. She damaged my property, Declan. I yelled back, my hands shaking with rage. She needs to take responsibility. It is a 10-year-old car. He snapped back. If you had parked it properly in the driveway instead of leaving it in a tight spot, maybe she would not have been stressed driving it out. You need to apologize to her right now. She is crying in the guest room because you made her feel bad. I stood there, looking at the man I married. He was demanding I apologize to the entitled woman who ruined my car. The injustice of it was physically suffocating. But I looked down the hallway and saw Flynn and my 8-year-old daughter Hazel peeking out from the living room. They looked terrified of the shouting. For their sake, I swallowed my pride yet again. I walked into the guest room and apologized to Sloane while she smirked at me. These were not isolated incidents. They were the constant rhythm of our marriage. My successes were ignored. My sacrifices were expected. My value was constantly diminished. I was the scapegoat, the punchline, the easy target for a family of narcissists. I told myself I was keeping the family together. I told myself things would get better if I just worked harder. But a person can only be pushed down so many times before they stop trying to stand up, or they decide to break the floor underneath them. My patience was running out. I just needed a catalyst. And then, Grandpa Harrison died. The funeral was small, just as Grandpa Harrison would have wanted. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked right through our dark coats. I stood by the open grave, holding Flynn and Hazel close to my sides. My heart felt entirely hollow. Grandpa was the only person in my life who had ever looked at me and told me he was proud of exactly who I was. He never asked me to be richer, thinner, or more successful. He just loved me. Declan stood beside me, holding a large black umbrella. He was wearing his custom Italian suit, taking great care not to let the mud touch his polished leather shoes. He looked at his Rolex twice during the eulogy. He did not shed a single tear. He was just doing his duty as the supportive husband, playing a flawless role for the handful of relatives in attendance. 3 days later, I received an unexpected phone call from a lawyer named Gemma. She asked me to come to her office for the reading of the will. I assumed it would be about Grandpa's small house or his old rusty car. I asked Declan to come with me for moral support. Gemma's office was not what I expected at all. It was located on the top floor of a sleek, expensive downtown building. Gemma herself was incredibly sharp. She wore a perfectly tailored suit, and her desk was immaculately organized. She offered us water, sat down, and got straight to the point without any unnecessary small talk. Harrison was a very private man, Gemma began, folding her hands neatly on the desk. He did not want his family to treat him differently based on his bank account, so he lived well below his means. But he was an exceptional investor. He had a brilliant mind for real estate. I nodded, confused. Okay. Gemma looked at me, her sharp eyes softening just a fraction. Maren, your grandfather established a blind trust many years ago. He poured the profits from his commercial real estate ventures directly into it. You are the sole primary beneficiary. No one else. Declan shifted abruptly in his chair. The boredom had vanished from his face instantly, replaced by a sudden, intense focus. A trust? He asked, his voice tight and eager. Yes, Gemma said, looking at him briefly before returning her gaze to me. It includes several highly profitable commercial properties in the downtown district, a diverse portfolio of index funds, and significant liquid assets. I felt dizzy. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Grandpa? Commercial properties? But he complained about the price of milk just last month. He wore shoes with holes in the soles. Gemma gave a small, knowing smile. He wanted you to have true security, Maren. Not a target on your back. He knew money changes how people treat you. Declan leaned forward, gripping the armrests of his leather chair so hard his knuckles were white. Well, he asked, his voice practically vibrating with anticipation. How much are we talking about here? Give us a number. Gemma's gaze flicked back to Declan. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The exact valuation is still being finalized due to current market fluctuations and ongoing property appraisals. But it is substantial. Declan's jaw clenched. He hated not knowing. Give me a ballpark figure. Are we talking hundreds of thousands? Millions? Gemma looked back at me, ignoring him entirely. We will discuss the exact figures when the final audit is complete next month. But Maren, I can assure you of this. You will never have to worry about money again for the rest of your life. The car ride home was suffocating. I was trying to process the deep loss of my grandfather and the shocking revelation of his secret wealthy life. I felt overwhelmed. Declan, however, was a vibrating wire of manic energy. We need to start planning right now, Maren, he said, gripping the steering wheel and talking fast. We can finally pay off all the credit cards. We can upgrade the house, maybe move to the gated community on the north side. We need to talk to a financial advisor immediately. My guy at the firm can handle it. He is a genius with tax shelters. I looked out the window at the passing cars. I felt numb. I just buried him, Declan. I do not want to think about money right now. Please just let me grieve. He scoffed loudly. Do not be naive, Maren. This is a massive game changer for us. We need to secure the assets before the government taxes eat it all up. We have to be smart about this. That night, I could not sleep. The house was quiet and dark. I went downstairs to get a glass of water from the kitchen. As I passed my home office, I saw a thin sliver of light coming from beneath the closed door. I pushed the door open slightly, careful not to make a sound. Declan was sitting at my desk. The glow of the computer screen illuminated his face. He was going through my locked filing cabinet, where I kept our tax returns, birth certificates, and old bank statements. He had my grandfather's death certificate laid out on the desk, along with a yellow notepad where he was furiously scribbling down numbers and property addresses he had apparently just researched online. What are you doing? I asked. My voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. Declan jumped, startled. He slammed the drawer shut instinctively. Maren, you scared me. Why are you going through my private files in the middle of the night? I asked, stepping into the room. He quickly recovered. He offered a smooth, practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. Just trying to get our ducks in a row, honey. We have a lot of complex paperwork ahead of us with this estate stuff. I want to make sure we are protected. I stared at him. The man who flatly refused to pay for his own son's braces because money was tight was now playing the role of a diligent, up-all-night financial planner. Something freezing cold settled deep in my stomach. It was a warning bell. I went back to bed, but I did not close my eyes. I felt a sudden, desperate need to fix things. Maybe the terrible stress of the funeral was making me paranoid. Maybe he really was just trying to help our family. Declan had a big business trip to Chicago scheduled for the end of the week. I decided I would take the kids and fly out to surprise him. We could have a nice family dinner, stay in a nice hotel, and reconnect away from all the stress. I desperately wanted to prove to myself that my husband loved me and not the phantom fortune my grandfather left behind. I thought a grand romantic gesture would save my marriage. But the surprise I had carefully planned for him in Chicago would end up being the exact surprise that destroyed me. Chicago was freezing. The harsh wind whipped violently off the lake, biting through our heavy winter coats as I dragged a suitcase and guided Flynn and Hazel into the grand, opulent lobby of the hotel where Declan was staying. I had secretly booked a separate room under my maiden name. My plan was to get the kids settled upstairs, order some fun room service to keep them occupied, and then go down to the hotel restaurant to surprise Declan when his corporate dinner wrapped up. I felt a flutter of nervous excitement in my chest. This was exactly what we needed. A hard reset. A reminder that we were a family built on love, not money. "Mom, can we go to the pool?" Hazel asked, tugging on my sleeve as we stood near a massive marble pillar waiting for the elevator bank to open. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetie," I said, smiling down at her bright face. "Let's go see Dad first. He is going to be so surprised." I glanced toward the grand entrance of the hotel restaurant. The heavy glass doors were propped open, spilling warm golden light and the sophisticated sound of clinking wine glasses into the lobby. And then my heart stopped. I saw him. Declan was standing near the hostess stand. But he was not with his regional sales team. He was standing intimately close to a woman. She was tall, wearing a sleek, form-fitting navy dress. Her dark hair fell perfectly over her bare shoulders. I recognized her instantly from a company holiday party 2 years ago. Her name was Kensington. She was a senior executive account manager at his firm. I froze. The warm smile melted entirely off my face. My blood ran cold. Kensington reached out and rested her hand flat against Declan's chest. It was not a friendly, professional touch. It was fiercely possessive. Intimate. Declan did not pull away. Instead, he placed his own hand over hers, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. He leaned in, whispering something in her ear that made her throw her head back and laugh loudly. My feet felt like they were suddenly set in concrete blocks. I could not breathe. The air felt too thin. Flynn bumped into my side. "Mom? Why are we stopping? Is that Dad over there?" I panicked. I stepped quickly behind the wide marble pillar, pulling Flynn and Hazel roughly with me into the shadows. "Stay quiet for a second, guys," I whispered. My voice was trembling violently. "Mom just needs to check something. Please, stay right here." From behind the massive pillar, I was only 10 feet away from them. I could not be seen, but I could hear them clearly over the ambient noise of the busy lobby. "So," Kensington said. Her voice was smooth, teasing, and arrogant. "How long are you going to keep playing the devoted, boring husband?" "I am getting really tired of waiting in the shadows, Declan." Declan sighed loudly. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I know, baby. I know. It is just really complicated right now." "Complicated how?" She pushed, stepping closer to him. "You said you were going to file the divorce papers this month. You said you were completely done with her." "I am done," Declan said. His voice dropped into that cruel, arrogant tone I knew so well. But things changed this week. The old man finally died. Kensington scoffed. "So? What does her dead, cheap grandfather have to do with us starting our life?" "Everything," Declan replied sharply. The old guy was loaded. Secretly loaded. He left a blind trust. We do not know the exact number yet, but my guy at the bank dug around and said the commercial properties alone are worth millions. Millions, Kens. I covered my mouth with both of my hands. I felt violently ill. The lobby started spinning. "Are you sure she will not fight you for it?" Kensington asked. She sounded suddenly very interested, her tone shifting from annoyed to greedy. Declan let out a sharp, mocking laugh. It was a sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life. "Fight me? With what? She is just a lowly auditor. She makes pennies compared to me. She does not even have a dime to pay for a decent lawyer. I have controlled the finances for a decade. She is clueless about how real money works. My chest physically ached. It felt like someone had driven a spike through my ribs. I looked down at Flynn. My 14-year-old son was staring intensely at the pillar. His eyes were wide. His jaw was clenched tight. He was old enough to understand exactly what his father was saying about his mother. Without thinking, I reached out and covered Flynn's ears, pulling his head tightly against my side to shield him. He did not resist. He just leaned into me, his body rigid with anger and sorrow. Once the trust is cleared and the exact valuation is confirmed by the lawyers, Declan continued, oblivious to the fact that he was destroying his family just 10 feet away. I will file the papers. I will hit her with so much legal jargon she will panic. I will offer her a quick, lowball settlement to walk away. She is weak. She avoids conflict at all costs. I will take the lion's share of that trust, and then it is just you and me. We will take that trip to Paris. Kensington smiled. She traced his lapel with her manicured finger. You are terrible. I am a strategist, Declan corrected smoothly, leaning in to kiss her neck. Now, let's go up to the room. I am exhausted. I stood there, trembling violently in the shadows, as they walked right past the pillar and headed toward the private elevators. I did not step out. I did not scream. I did not cause a dramatic scene. I just held my children tightly in the cold shadow of that marble. For 16 years, I had been the good, obedient wife. I had forgiven the vicious insults. I had endured his mother's endless cruelty. I had worked myself to the bone while he spent our money on expensive watches and tailored suits. I had done it all because I genuinely believed, underneath it all, we were a team. But I was never a partner to him. I was a host. And he was a parasite, waiting patiently for the right moment to drain me. Mom? Hazel whispered. She looked up at me with big, confused, innocent eyes. Are we going to see Dad now? Did he see us? I looked down at her sweet face and then at Flynn, whose eyes were shining with unshed, angry tears. Something deep inside me snapped. The overwhelming sorrow, the crushing heartbreak, the heavy weight of betrayal, it all burned away in a single instant. What replaced it was something cold, sharp, and terrifyingly clear. The weak woman who cried in the bathroom to avoid making a scene was dead. The woman who let Blythe mock her cooking was gone forever. I am an auditor. My entire professional career is built on finding discrepancies, uncovering fraud, and destroying arrogant people who think they are smart enough to cheat the system. Declan wanted a financial war? He thought I was a clueless, lowly auditor who did not know how to fight? No, sweetie, I said. My voice was incredibly steady and dangerously calm. We are not going to see Dad tonight. We are going home right now. I did not confront him. I did not send a dramatic, angry text message. I silently checked us out of the hotel, hailed a cab to the airport, and booked the next flight back home in the dead of night. Declan wanted to play a complex game of strategy. Fine. But he did not realize he had just handed the rulebook directly to the referee. I was going to show him exactly what a real audit looked like. The hardest performance of my entire life was not standing silently in that hotel lobby in Chicago. It was opening the front door when Declan finally returned home late Sunday evening, acting like everything was perfectly normal. Hey honey, he said. He dropped his expensive leather overnight bag in the hallway. He walked over and kissed my cheek casually. He smelled like expensive cologne and airplane coffee, but beneath that, I could smell the faint trace of Kensington's floral perfume. I did not flinch. I smiled. How was the trip? I asked, taking his heavy coat and hanging it up. Exhausting, he sighed loudly. He rubbed the back of his neck, playing the part of the tired provider perfectly. Meetings all day, client dinners all night. I am so incredibly glad to be home. Liar. The word echoed loudly in my skull, but my face remained a flawless mask of domestic tranquility. Go take a hot shower, I said softly. I will warm up some dinner for you. While he was upstairs washing the scent of his mistress off his skin, I stood alone in the kitchen. I gripped the edge of the cold granite counter until my knuckles turned white. The rage inside me was a living, breathing thing. I wanted to smash all the expensive dishes against the wall. I wanted to drag his custom suits into the driveway and set them on fire. But an auditor knows that wild emotions ruin investigations. You do not show your hand until you have gathered all the irrefutable evidence. The next morning, after Declan left for his office and the kids were safely dropped off at school, I drove straight to Gemma's law firm. I did not have an appointment, but when her receptionist saw the look on my face, she ushered me right in. Gemma took one look at me and firmly closed the heavy wooden door. "Maren? What happened? You look terrible." I sat down in the leather chair opposite her desk. I told her everything. The desperate trip to Chicago. Seeing Kensington. The conversation behind the pillar. The explicit plan to drain my grandfather's trust and leave me with nothing but legal fees. Gemma did not offer empty platitudes. She did not tell me it would be okay or hand me a tissue. She reached for her legal pad and pulled a silver pen from her breast pocket. The sympathy in her sharp eyes vanished entirely, replaced by the intense focus of a predator hunting its prey. "He wants to play dirty," she said quietly, writing something down. "Let's see exactly how much dirt he is standing in." "First, I need to know the actual number, Gemma," I said. I leaned forward, resting my hands on her desk. "Declan thinks it is millions. I need to know exactly what I am fighting to protect." Gemma opened a thick, locked file on her desk. She turned the folder around so I could read the final page of the summary report. The total valuation of the Harrison Trust, including the downtown commercial properties, the diverse index funds, and the liquid cash accounts, she said. She tapped the bottom line heavily with her pen. "Is exactly $45,200,000. I stopped breathing. 45 million. I thought it might be 2 million. Maybe 3 if we were incredibly lucky. But 45? Grandpa Harrison had lived like a pauper while quietly sitting on a massive empire. "That money is entirely yours, Maren," Gemma continued, her voice firm. "It is an inheritance, legally kept in a trust separate from all marital assets. Under our state law, it is not subject to division in a divorce unless you commingle the funds. That means, unless you transfer it into a joint bank account or use it to pay off marital debts, he cannot touch a single cent." Which is exactly what Declan wants to do, I realized. The puzzle pieces were finally snapping into place. That is why he was digging through my files the other night. He wants to convince me to move the money to pay off our shared debts. Gemma nodded slowly. "And it gets much worse." She pulled another single document from the thick file. "I did not want to show you this until I had verified its origin, but your husband has been very busy." She slid a printed email across the polished wood desk. It was addressed to the trust management firm. It was a formal inquiry asking for the strict legal prerequisites to add a spouse as a co-trustee, citing sudden health concerns for the primary beneficiary. It was sent from Declan's personal email account. I looked at the date stamped at the top of the page. I felt a freezing cold chill wash over my entire body. "Gemma," I whispered, pointing at the paper. "This email is dated 3 months before Grandpa died." "Yes," she said softly. He knew. Declan somehow found out about the trust. He had been planning this financial coup before my grandfather even passed away. He was literally just waiting for him to die. I felt sick to my stomach. The betrayal was so deep and calculated it felt like severe physical trauma. My husband was not just a cheater. He was a financial predator who had been circling my family for months, waiting for the weakest member to fall so he could feast. When I returned home that evening, Declan was sitting at the kitchen island. He was nursing a glass of expensive bourbon. He looked up when I walked in, offering that same polished, fake smile. "Hey," he said casually. "I was going through some boring paperwork today. I noticed our life insurance policies desperately need updating. Since your grandfather passed, we really need to make sure our estate planning is bulletproof for the kids." He slid a thick manila folder across the marble counter toward me. "I just need you to sign these," he said, taking a slow sip of his drink. "It is standard stuff. Just authorizations to streamline our financial accounts so we can manage everything jointly. You know, to make things easier on you so you do not have to stress." I looked down at the innocent-looking folder. He was not asking me to update life insurance. He was handing me a loaded gun and asking me to pull the trigger on myself. I will look them over tomorrow, I said, keeping my voice light and unbothered. I am really exhausted tonight, Declan. Declan's smile tightened significantly. His fingers tapped a restless, angry rhythm on the glass. Just sign them now, Marin. It will take 2 seconds. I want to drop them off at the broker's office first thing in the morning. I picked up the folder and held it tightly to my chest. I said I will look at them tomorrow, Declan. For a split second, his mask slipped. His eyes flashed with raw, unadulterated rage. He hated being told no. He hated losing control. But he quickly recovered, forcing a dry chuckle. Suit yourself. But do not complain when the paperwork piles up and you get overwhelmed. I walked upstairs, locked the folder securely in my work briefcase, and sat on the edge of the bed. The war had officially begun in my house, and the enemy was sleeping in my bed. The next 3 days were a terrifying masterclass in psychological warfare. When I continually found various excuses not to sign his fake insurance papers, Declan deployed his absolute favorite weapon, the silent treatment. He stopped speaking to me entirely. He would not look at me during dinner. If I walked into a room, he immediately stood up and walked out. He was intentionally trying to freeze me out. He wanted to make me feel so incredibly isolated and anxious that I would blindly sign anything just to win back his affection and restore peace to the house. It was a manipulative tactic that had worked 100 times before. But this time, I was not anxious. I was taking detailed notes. When the silent treatment failed to break my resolve, Declan called in the heavy reinforcements. In the dark world of narcissistic abuse, they are called flying monkeys. They are the loyal enablers who eagerly do the abuser's dirty work. For Declan, that meant activating his mother, Blythe, and his sister, Sloane. It started early on Thursday morning. My phone buzzed loudly on my desk while I was reviewing a complex compliance audit at work. It was a long text message from Sloane. Declan says you are being completely impossible about the estate planning. Why are you so incredibly greedy? He works so hard to provide a good life for you and the kids while you sit around. Stop being such a control freak and let him handle the money. You do not know what you are doing anyway. You are just going to lose it all. I read the cruel text twice. I did not reply. I did not defend myself. I just took a clear screenshot and sent it directly to a secure cloud folder Gemma had carefully set up for me. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. The caller ID showed it was Blythe. I let it go straight to voicemail. 5 minutes later, I put in my earphones and listened to the recording. Marin, it is Blythe, her voice dripped with heavy condescension and fake concern. Declan is extremely stressed right now because of you. He is carrying the entire financial weight of your family on his shoulders. The very least you can do is sign the simple documents he asked you to. Your grandfather was a nice man, but let us be brutally honest. Whatever little bit of money he left behind needs to be managed by a competent professional, not a lowly paper pusher like you. Stop being difficult and support your husband for once in your life. I calmly saved the toxic voicemail to the secure cloud folder. Evidence. When I got home that evening, Declan was sitting on the couch in the dark living room, watching television. He did not acknowledge me when I walked in. I walked into the room and put on the greatest performance of my life. I forced my breathing to become rapid and erratic. I let my shoulders slump into feet, and I put a desperate tremor in my voice. Declan? I said. I made myself sound small, weak, and broken. He did not look away from the television screen. What? I cannot take this anymore, I whispered, forcing a single tear to fall down my cheek. I am so sorry. I am just so overwhelmed with the funeral and all this legal paperwork. I feel like I am drowning. Your mom and Sloane are mad at me, and I hate it. I do not know what to do. I will sign the papers this weekend. I promise I will. Just, please stop ignoring me. I need you. Declan finally turned his head to look at me. The smug, arrogant satisfaction on his face was deeply nauseating. He looked at me exactly the way a predator looks at a wounded animal. He stood up slowly, walked over, and patted me awkwardly on the shoulder. It is okay, Marin, he said. His voice was dripping with fake sympathy and triumph. You are just overly emotional. You aren't equipped to handle this kind of high-level stress. We will get it sorted out this weekend. You just need to trust me to take care of things. I nodded submissively, keeping my eyes fixed firmly on the floor. I will. I knew exactly what I had just done. I had expertly stroked his ego. I had made him feel utterly invincible. I had convinced him that I was a hysterical, weak woman who was completely at his mercy. And a narcissist who feels invincible always makes catastrophic mistakes. He gets sloppy. He gets overly eager. He gets impatient. Declan did not want to wait until the weekend to secure his bag. He truly thought I was broken and desperate, which meant it was the perfect time to drop the hammer and secure his financial control through the courts before I could change my mind. Monday morning, I stayed home from work, claiming I had a severe migraine. Declan left for the office early, whistling a cheerful tune as he walked out the door. At exactly 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I walked to the front door and opened it. A man in a plain windbreaker was standing on the porch holding a thick manila envelope. "Marin?" he asked neutrally. "Yes," I said. He handed me the heavy envelope. "You have been served." I took the envelope, closed the door quietly, and walked into the kitchen. I did not cry. I did not panic. I opened the flap and pulled out the thick stack of legal documents. It was a formal petition for divorce. I sat at the kitchen island and carefully read through his ridiculous demands. It was exactly what he had promised Kensington in that hotel lobby. He was demanding full custody of the primary residence, temporary control of all joint bank accounts, and significant spousal support, claiming that my income was insufficient to maintain his lavish standard of living. But the most glaring, damning paragraph was on page 4. He formally accused me of hiding marital assets. He requested an emergency injunction to seize control of the Harrison Trust, explicitly claiming I was mentally unfit to manage it and was actively attempting to defraud him. He had filed. He actually did it. He thought by hitting me with aggressive legal jargon and outrageous demands, I would crumble in fear and sign a quick settlement just to make the pain stop. I picked up my phone and called Gemma. "Did you get them?" she asked, answering on the very first ring. "Yes," I said. I was staring at the signature of Declan's high-priced, aggressive lawyer at the bottom of the page. He filed. Gemma let out a low, predatory chuckle. Perfect. He just legally activated the discovery phase. Now, we can legally subpoena every single bank record, text message, and credit card statement he has ever made. He thinks he set a brilliant trap for you, Marin. But he just locked himself inside the cage and handed us the key. I hung up the phone. I looked around my quiet kitchen at the life I had diligently built for 16 long years. It was over. But for the first time in a decade, I was not afraid. Let the audit begin. Thank you for following the first part of the story. If you resonate with what Marin is going through, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel to show your support. The journey to expose Declan has only just begun. The immediate aftermath of receiving divorce papers is supposed to be a period of profound grief and overwhelming confusion. Society expects you to fall apart, to cry on the kitchen floor, to beg your spouse for a second chance, or to scream at the walls. Declan certainly expected all of those things from me. He had spent 16 years carefully conditioning me to be the weak, accommodating wife who would bend over backwards the moment he showed the slightest hint of displeasure. He thought his legal filing would be the ultimate weapon of intimidation. Instead, it was the greatest gift he could have ever given me. By filing for divorce and formally accusing me of financial misconduct, Declan legally opened the door to a process called discovery. In the legal world, discovery is the phase where both parties are forced to lay all their financial cards on the table under penalty of perjury. He thought he was trapping me. He had no idea he had just handed a corporate compliance auditor the legal authority to dissect his entire life. 2 weeks after the papers were served, we had our first mandatory mediation meeting. It was held in a neutral conference room at a very expensive downtown law firm hired by Declan. The room smelled of stale coffee, expensive leather, and unearned arrogance. I arrived early with Gemma. I wore a simple, tailored gray suit. I wore no makeup other than a little mascara. I wanted to look exactly like the lowly, boring auditor Declan believed me to be. 10 minutes later, Declan walked in. He was flanked by his high-priced attorney, a slick man named Vance who wore a suit that probably cost more than my first car. Declan looked incredibly smug. He did not look like a man whose family was falling apart. He looked like a man who was about to close the biggest business deal of his entire career. He sat down across from me, leaned back in his plush leather chair, and steepled his fingers. He offered me a tight, patronizing smile. "Hello, Marin," he said smoothly. "I hope we can keep this civil. For the sake of the children, of course." I did not smile back. I just looked at him, letting the silence stretch out until it became uncomfortable. Vance, his attorney, cleared his throat and opened a thick leather binder. "Let us get straight to business," Vance began, his voice dripping with condescension. "My client is a generous man. He recognizes that you have been out of the primary breadwinner role for your entire marriage. He wants to make this transition as painless as possible for you, despite your recent erratic behavior and your refusal to cooperate with standard estate planning." I glanced at Gemma. She did not even blink. She just sat there, her pen poised over her legal pad, letting them dig their own grave. Vance slid a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany table. "This is our initial settlement offer," he said proudly. "It is more than fair. In fact, it is exceedingly generous given the circumstances." I picked up the paper and read it. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. The offer was not just insulting, it was financially predatory. Declan was proposing that he retain full ownership of our primary residence, claiming he needed it to maintain stability for his high-profile job. He generously offered to let me keep my 10-year-old sedan. He offered a lump sum payment of $10,000 from our joint savings account to help me secure a modest apartment. In exchange, I was to waive all rights to future spousal support, waive all rights to his corporate retirement accounts, and, most importantly, grant him a 50% share of any inherited assets acquired during the marriage, explicitly naming the Harrison Trust. He wants half of a trust he knows nothing about, I thought to myself. He is trying to get me to sign away tens of millions of dollars in exchange for a used car and $10,000. I looked up from the paper. I looked directly into Declan's eyes. "You think this is fair?" I asked, keeping my voice soft and trembling just a little bit, playing the part of the overwhelmed wife. Declan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. He looked at me with deep, fake pity. "Marin, be reasonable. You do not have the income to maintain the house. You do not understand how much it costs to run our lifestyle. I am trying to save you from drowning in debt. Take the deal. You do not have the money to drag this out in court. The legal fees alone will bankrupt you in a month. Just sign it, and we can both walk away cleanly." Gemma finally spoke. Her voice was like ice cracking on a frozen lake. "We will not be signing this document, today or ever." Vance bristled, his face turning a slight shade of red. "Now listen here, Ms. Gemma. If your client wants to play hardball, we are fully prepared to go to trial. We will freeze all marital assets. She will not have a dime to live on. We are offering a lifeline." "No," Gemma corrected smoothly. "You are offering a joke. And since your client has formally accused my client of hiding marital assets in his official divorce petition, we are formally requesting full financial discovery. We want every bank statement, every credit card bill, every tax return, and every corporate expense report Mr. Declan has filed for the last 5 years." Declan scoffed loudly, rolling his eyes. "Go ahead. I have nothing to hide. I am the one who has been transparent this entire time. She is the one playing games." Gemma smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Excellent. We will see you in court, gentlemen." We stood up and walked out of the conference room. I did not look back. I knew exactly what Declan was thinking. He was thinking he had won. He was thinking I was just being stubborn, but that the crushing weight of impending legal fees would eventually force me to surrender. He was entirely confident that his financial secrets were safe. He had no idea that his arrogant demand for my grandfather's trust was the exact legal maneuver that would allow me to destroy him. He thought his filing was his greatest victory, but it was actually the final nail in his coffin. The discovery phase of a contentious divorce is incredibly tedious. It is a slow, grueling process of requesting, receiving, and analyzing thousands of pages of financial records. For a normal person, it is a nightmare of endless paperwork. For a corporate compliance auditor, it is just another Tuesday at the office. Gemma managed the legal strategy, but I managed the numbers. I took 2 weeks of personal leave from my job. I turned my dining room table into a forensic accounting war room. I had 3 computer monitors set up. I had color-coded highlighters, sticky notes, and massive spreadsheets detailing every single penny that had flowed in and out of our marital accounts over the past 60 months. Declan was arrogant, but he was also incredibly sloppy. He truly believed I was too stupid to understand complex financial documents. He thought that because he handled the bills, I would never figure out his system. It took me exactly 4 days to find the first hidden account. It was a secret credit card opened in his name, using his corporate office as the billing address. The statements were never mailed to our house. The balances were paid off using small, irregular transfers from a separate checking account he had failed to disclose on his initial financial affidavit. That alone was perjury. But the actual charges on the card were what truly made my blood run cold. Over the past 2 years, Declan had spent thousands of dollars on Kensington. I sat at my table at 2 in the morning, bathed in the blue light of my monitor, staring at the undeniable proof of his betrayal. There were charges for luxury hotel rooms in Chicago, New York, and Miami. There were receipts for expensive dinners at restaurants he told me were too pricey for our budget. There was a charge for a $2,000 diamond necklace bought 3 days before Valentine's Day. He had given me a generic greeting card and a wilted bouquet of grocery store roses that year, claiming he was trying to be financially responsible. But the affair was only the tip of the iceberg. As I dug deeper into his disclosed and undisclosed accounts, I uncovered a terrifying web of financial ruin. Declan was projecting the image of a wealthy, successful executive, but in reality, he was drowning in debt. He had taken out massive personal loans to fund his extravagant lifestyle. He had secretly remortgaged our house a year ago, forging my signature on the electronic authorization forms, pulling out tens of thousands of dollars in equity to pay off his gambling debts and his mounting credit card bills. And then, I found the transfers to his family. For years, Blythe and Sloane had mocked my modest salary. They had treated me like a financial burden. But the spreadsheets told a very different story. Declan had been secretly funneling thousands of dollars of our marital money to his mother and his sister every single month. He was paying the rent for Sloane's luxury apartment. He was covering Blythe's expensive country club membership. He was entirely funding their arrogant, toxic lifestyles using the money that should have gone toward our children's college funds. The pieces of the puzzle finally locked together. The crippling debt, the secret loans, the expensive mistress, the parasitic family. Declan had not filed for divorce because he hated me. He had not filed for divorce because he was deeply in love with Kensington. He filed for divorce because he was broke. He was financially desperate. His house of cards was rapidly collapsing, and he knew it was only a matter of time before the banks came calling. When my grandfather died, Declan saw a way out. He needed the Harrison Trust to save himself. He planned to take my inheritance, pay off his secret debts, keep his mistress, and leave me holding the bag for the ruined marital finances. I printed out every single statement. I highlighted every fraudulent transfer. I compiled a thick, undeniable dossier of evidence proving his infidelity, his financial abuse, and his blatant perjury. When I handed the heavy binder to Gemma the next morning, she flipped through the pages in silent awe. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with genuine professional respect. "Maren," she whispered, "this is incredible work. He lied on his sworn financial affidavits. He forged your signature on a mortgage document. He dissipated marital assets to fund an extramarital affair and support third parties without your consent. What does that mean for the court? I asked quietly. It means he is dead in the water, Gemma said, snapping the binder shut. Not only will the judge deny his request for your inheritance, but his financial fraud means you are entitled to a vastly disproportionate share of whatever marital assets are actually left. We are going to destroy him. I drove back to my house that afternoon. The sky was gray and a cold wind was blowing dead leaves across the streets. Tomorrow was the final hearing. Tomorrow, the judge would rule on the division of assets and the fate of the trust. Declan had sent me a text message earlier that morning. It was short and cruel. Last chance to sign the settlement, Marin. Do not embarrass yourself in court tomorrow. You know you cannot win. I did not reply. I just turned off my phone, went upstairs, and laid out my tailored navy blue suit for the morning. The time for crying was over. The time for being the obedient, invisible wife was gone. Tomorrow, the mask would finally come off. The morning of the final hearing was unseasonably cold. A bitter frost coated the windshield of my car, and the sky was a pale, bruised purple. I dressed carefully. I put on my navy blue suit, pinned my hair back firmly, and walked into the Grand County Courthouse with my head held high. I did not feel like a victim anymore. I felt like an executioner. When I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom, the air instantly felt hostile. Declan was already seated at the petitioner's table with his attorney, Vance. Declan looked incredibly relaxed. He was wearing a brand new charcoal suit. He leaned back in his chair, chatting casually with Vance, occasionally letting out a low, confident laugh. Behind him, sitting in the very front row of the gallery, were his loyal flying monkeys. Blythe was wearing an expensive cream-colored blazer, her hair perfectly styled. Sloane sat next to her, chewing gum loudly and scrolling on her phone, looking supremely bored. When they saw me walk in with Gemma, Sloane nudged her mother. They both looked at me, whispering to each other, their faces twisted into identical expressions of arrogant pity. I took my seat at the respondents' table. I did not look at them. I kept my eyes fixed forward, breathing slowly and evenly. All rise, the bailiff announced loudly. Judge Mercer walked in, his black robes billowing slightly. He took his seat at the high bench, adjusted his glasses, and looked down at the massive stack of files in front of him. He did not look happy. He looked like a man who was tired of dealing with messy, dishonest divorces. "Let us proceed," the judge said gruffly. "We are here to determine the final division of assets, spousal support, and the status of the respondent's inheritance. Mr. Vance, your client has filed an emergency motion to seize control of the Harrison Trust, alleging the respondent has hidden marital funds within it and is mentally unfit to manage it." "That is correct, Your Honor," Vance said, standing up smoothly. "We believe the respondent has actively engaged in financial deception. We are simply asking for transparency and a fair 50% split of all assets acquired during the marriage, including this undisclosed trust, to offset my client's significant financial burdens." Judge Mercer nodded slowly. He turned his stern gaze toward our table. "Ms. Gemma, you have submitted the final audited valuation of the trust, as well as a counter-motion regarding marital assets." "Yes, Your Honor," Gemma said, standing up tall. "We have provided the full, verified documentation of the Harrison Trust, managed by an independent financial institution. We have also provided a comprehensive forensic audit of the marital accounts, which paints a very different picture of who is engaging in financial deception." The judge opened the thick binder Gemma had submitted the day before. The courtroom was dead silent. The only sound was the rustling of heavy paper as Judge Mercer read through the summary pages. Declan leaned forward slightly, trying to gauge the judge's reaction. Blythe sat up straight, practically vibrating with greedy anticipation. They all thought the judge was about to hand them a massive payday. After several long, agonizing minutes, Judge Mercer looked up. He took off his glasses and placed them on the desk. He looked directly at Declan. "Mr. Declan," the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You signed a sworn financial affidavit stating that your total marital debt was approximately $15,000, and you claimed you had no undisclosed financial accounts." Declan swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor." Then can you explain to this court, the judge continued, raising his voice slightly, why these subpoenaed bank records show an undisclosed personal credit card with a balance of $42,000. A card that was used entirely for luxury hotels, expensive jewelry, and dining in multiple out-of-state locations? Declan froze. The confident smirk vanished entirely from his face. He looked at Vance, panic suddenly flashing in his eyes. Vance looked confused, frantically flipping through his own notes. And furthermore, Judge Mercer pressed on, his tone growing sharper. Can you explain the fraudulent second mortgage taken out on the primary residence, utilizing an electronic signature that digital forensic experts have verified did not originate from your wife's device? Or the $80,000 in marital funds that were systematically transferred to accounts belonging to your mother, Blythe, and your sister, Sloane, without your wife's knowledge or consent? A loud gasp echoed from the front row. I did not turn around, but I knew Blythe had just realized her secret income stream was suddenly public record. Your Honor, Vance stammered, clearly blindsided by his own client's lies. My client maintains that those were necessary expenses for. For what? The judge interrupted sharply. For funding an extramarital affair? For supporting adult family members while secretly plunging his own household into crippling, fraudulent debt? Declan was breathing heavily now. The color had completely drained from his face. He looked like a man standing on the trapdoor of a gallows, waiting for the lever to be pulled. The judge turned his attention back to the trust documents. You accused your wife of financial instability, Mr. Declan. You demanded control of her inheritance to save her from herself. The judge picked up the final sheet of paper. Let us address this inheritance. According to the independent audit, the Harrison Trust was established long before your marriage. No marital funds were ever commingled. It is, by strict legal definition, entirely separate property. You have absolutely no legal claim to it whatsoever. Declan's shoulders slumped heavily. The fight drained out of him. He knew he had lost his lifeline. He knew he was going to be buried in his own debt. And as for the valuation, Judge Mercer continued, his voice ringing out clearly in the silent room. The verified net worth of the Harrison Trust, which belongs solely and exclusively to the respondent, is $45,200,000. The silence that followed was absolute. It was so profound, it felt heavy. Declan slowly turned his head. His mouth was slightly open. He stared at me with wide, horrified eyes. He was doing the math in his head. He was realizing that he had just aggressively divorced a woman worth over $45 million, all to protect his own pathetic, fraudulent debts and his shallow affair. From the row behind him, a sharp, piercing shriek shattered the silence. It was Sloane. 45 million. She screamed, entirely forgetting where she was. That was the exact moment the earthquake hit. The courtroom erupted into utter chaos. Blythe, who had been sitting rigidly in the pew, suddenly stood up. Her face was chalk white, her eyes wide with a mixture of profound shock and devastating realization. She looked from me, to the judge, and then down at her son. Her hands began to shake violently. She tried to speak, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. She swayed heavily on her feet, reached blindly for the wooden railing, missed it entirely, and collapsed backward onto the hard wooden bench in a dead faint. "Mom," Sloane screamed, dropping her phone and dropping to her knees beside her unconscious mother. "Somebody help her. She is not breathing right." The bailiff rushed forward, calling for medical assistance on his radio. The judge banged his gavel loudly, demanding order in his court, but the noise was deafening. Amidst the frantic shouting and the chaotic movement, I sat perfectly still at my table. I did not smile. I did not cheer. I just watched the destruction of the toxic empire that had terrorized me for 16 long years. Judge Mercer ordered a temporary recess while the paramedics were brought in to tend to Blythe. The courtroom slowly cleared out. Vance, looking furious and profoundly embarrassed by his client's hidden fraud, packed up his briefcase and walked out without saying a single word to Declan. Declan was left standing entirely alone in the center of the room. He looked disheveled. The polished, arrogant regional sales director was gone. He looked older, smaller, and deeply pathetic. He slowly walked over to my table. Gemma stood up, moving to block him, but I raised my hand gently to stop her. I wanted to hear what he had to say. "Marin," Declan whispered. His voice was hoarse, cracking with raw desperation. "Marin, please." I did not know. I looked at him, my face a cold, unreadable mask. "You did not know what, Declan? You did not know I had $45 million? Or you did not know I was smart enough to catch you stealing from our family?" He reached out, his hand trembling, trying to touch my arm. I stepped back, out of his reach. "Please," he begged, tears suddenly pooling in his eyes. I made a massive mistake. I was stressed. The debts were piling up, and Kensington she meant nothing. She was just a distraction. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I love you, Marin. I have always loved you." I stared at the man I had dedicated my entire adult life to. The man I had cooked for, cleaned for, and sacrificed my own happiness for. He was standing there, crying real tears, desperately begging for a second chance. But I knew the absolute truth. He was not crying for me. He was crying for the $45 million he had just permanently lost. I leaned in slightly. My voice was calm, steady, and devoid of any emotion. "I am just a lowly auditor, Declan," I said softly, echoing the exact words he had spoken in that Chicago hotel lobby. "I do not have a dime to fight you. Remember? You were going to break me down. You were going to take it all." Declan physically recoiled as if I had just slapped him across the face. His eyes widened in absolute terror. You heard that?" He choked out, his face turning pale. "I heard everything," I replied coldly. "And then I audited everything. You wanted a financial war, Declan. Congratulations. You got one. Now you get to live with the exact life you built behind my back." I turned around and walked out of the courtroom, leaving him standing there in the ruins of his own massive ego. The aftermath was swift and brutal. When the hearing resumed, Judge Mercer showed absolutely zero mercy. Because of the proven financial fraud, the forged signatures, and the deliberate dissipation of marital assets to fund his affair and his family, the judge awarded me primary custody of Flynn and Hazel. He ordered the immediate sale of our house, with all equity going directly to me to offset the debts Declan had fraudulently created. Declan was ordered to assume 100% of his secret credit card debt and the personal loans. By the time the gavel fell for the final time, Declan was legally bankrupt. And the poetic justice did not end there. 2 days after the final ruling, Kensington found out that Declan was broke, deeply in debt, and would not be receiving a single penny of the trust fund. She dumped him immediately via a 2-sentence text message and blocked his phone number. She wanted a sugar daddy, not a financial liability. Declan lost his wife, his children, his house, his mistress, and his pristine reputation, all because he could not stop himself from being greedy. 6 months have passed since that explosive day in the courtroom. My life is incredibly quiet now. It is not magically perfect, and healing from 16 years of psychological abuse takes profound time and effort, but my house is peaceful. There are no more whispered arguments. There are no more walking on eggshells. There are no more cruel remarks about my cooking or my modest clothes. I bought a beautiful, secure home in a quiet neighborhood with excellent schools for Flynn and Hazel. I did not buy a sprawling mansion or a fleet of luxury cars. Grandpa Harrison taught me that true wealth is quiet. True wealth is the profound peace of mind knowing that you and your children are entirely safe. With the help of Gemma and a team of trusted financial advisors, I set up robust education funds for both of my children. They will be able to attend any college they choose without ever worrying about student loans. But I also wanted the Harrison Trust to mean something far beyond my own family. I remembered how terrified I felt when Declan handed me those fake insurance papers. I remembered the crushing, suffocating feeling of financial abuse, of being manipulated by someone who controlled the money. So, I took a significant portion of the liquid assets and established a private legal foundation. It provides free, top-tier legal representation and forensic accounting services for women who are trapped in financially abusive marriages. I use my skills as an auditor to help them track hidden accounts, expose fraudulent debts, and fight back against arrogant men who think they hold all the power. As for Declan, his fall from grace was absolute. Without my stable income and his fraudulent loans to prop him up, his fake empire collapsed entirely. He was forced to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. He lost his luxury car. The stress and the public humiliation of the divorce severely impacted his work performance, and he was eventually quietly let go from his position as regional sales director. With nowhere else to go, a 40-year-old Declan had to move into a cramped, two-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town. He does not live there alone. Because Declan could no longer secretly pay her rent, Sloane was evicted from her luxury high-rise. And because Blythe could no longer rely on my stolen marital funds to support her lavish lifestyle, she had to downsize as well. Now, the three of them, Declan, his entitled mother, and his chronically lazy sister, are all crammed together in that tiny apartment. I hear through the grapevine that their living situation is an absolute nightmare. Blythe constantly complains about the lack of space and the cheap groceries. Sloane refuses to get a job and yells at Declan for not providing for them. Declan stews in his own bitter resentment, trapped in a hell of his own making, surrounded by the exact toxic people he destroyed his marriage to impress. They turn their venom on each other now, because I am no longer there to be their designated punching bag. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in my quiet study, drinking tea and looking at the handwritten letter Grandpa Harrison left for me in the trust documents. "Money does not change who you are, Marin," he wrote in his shaky handwriting. "It only removes the mask. It gives people the freedom to show you exactly what they have always been. Protect yourself, be kind, but never let anyone convince you that you are small." He was incredibly right. The $45 million did not change me. I am still the same woman. I still wear practical shoes. I still love a good spreadsheet. I still bake sweet potato casseroles from scratch. But the money undeniably changed my circumstances. It gave me the sharp sword I desperately needed to cut the toxic ties that were slowly strangling me. It gave me the immense power to finally say no. Declan thought he was leaving a poor, weak woman who would crumble without his financial dominance. He discovered, in the most humiliating way possible, that he was leaving an incredibly wealthy, intelligent woman who knew exactly how to audit his lies. But that was not the real plot twist of my story. The real twist was that by the time Judge Mercer loudly revealed my massive net worth to the courtroom, I had already discovered something profoundly more valuable than $45 million. I had finally discovered my own worth. I learned that my value as a human being is not dictated by an arrogant husband, a cruel mother-in-law, or a lazy sister-in-law. I learned that silence is not always weakness. Sometimes, silence is just a smart auditor gathering irrefutable evidence. Recently, Declan's mother messaged me, begging for a small loan to cover her medical expenses. Do you think I should stay silent, just as she once did with me, or should I reply? Let me know in the comments. If this story gave you strength, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss future stories. Thank you for listening.